Okay, so let's start off with the facts. Let's begin with a little bit of background on Qatar. Qatar, which is officially known as the State of Qatar, is a sovereign country located in Western Asia. Following Ottoman rule, Qatar became a British protectorate in the early 20th century until gaining independence in 1971. However, Qatar has been ruled by the House of Thani since the early 19th century. Sheikh Jassim bin Mohammed Al Thani was the founder of the State of Qatar. Today, Qatar is a hereditary monarchy, and its head of state is Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Now, as I mentioned, Qatar is a pretty small country, but when we look at the population, how many people actually live in Qatar? From the latest numbers in early 2017, the population of Qatar was 2.6 million people. And that ranks it at 422nd in the world based on the population by country. And when we break down that number, it's 313,000 Qatar citizens, and there's 2.3 temporary residents of Qatar. Now, when we explore the total land area of Qatar, it's 11,610 square kilometers. That's roughly 4,483 square miles. Doha is the capital city of Qatar, and it's also the biggest city. Doha's total population is 344,939 people. Now, when we travel to downtown Doha, near the waterfront, we see tons of parks, as well as the Corniche Promenade. On a man-made island, we also see the Museum of Islamic Art that has a massive art collection from different places all across the Muslim world. Over 60% of the residents in Qatar actually live in Doha, the capital city, and the population density of Doha is pretty high. Like, according to the latest numbers, it's 221.3 people per square kilometer. But when you look at the total population density of Qatar in general, Qatar is at 221.3 people per square kilometers, and its population density has increased from 7.4 people per square kilometer in the year 1967 all the way to 221.3 people per square kilometer, and it's growing at an average annual of 7.25%. Okay guys, so I grew up speaking English, and to some people I may be pronouncing the word Qatar a bit differently than you are. But you see, all of the different pronunciations of Qatar you would say are correct, right? The word Qatar can be pronounced in several different ways. And some of the common ways of pronouncing it are Qatar, and then there's Qatar, 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 and Qatar. Like, I mean, really, like, when you go to different parts of the world, like, people pronounce it differently, but they're all correct, okay? And I mean, people in Qatar don't seem to mind. I don't hear them really complaining about the pronunciation, so they're all acceptable ways to pronounce it. So yeah, that wasn't really like a fact, just kind of like just some fun information. And also, I don't want to hear in the comment section, Leroy, you're pronouncing Qatar wrong. Yeah, I know sometimes my pronunciation sucks, guys. I get it, okay? Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the cities and districts in Qatar. The cities and districts are generally named after their geographical features. For instance, Doha means roundness, and it reflects the rounded bays that categorize Qatar's coastlines. Gualina means mother of Gulen, and Gulen is a kind of shrub that grows in that area. And also there's Umslai Ali, which means mother of rocks. If you ever visit Qatar, you'll probably notice that their weekend system operates differently. It's not Saturday and Sunday like here in North America and other parts of the world, but actually it falls on Friday and Saturday. So you can expect stores to be closed on Friday morning in observance of the afternoon prayer. When it comes to eating food in Qatar, so Qatar isn't the source of most of their food production. Actually, 92% of its food is imported. And the countries that they mainly import food from are countries nearby like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. And you know, some of Qatar's cuisine dates back to a few millennia. One of Qatar's most popular dishes is a pretty simple dish. It's haris made from wheat. It dates back to the 10th century, and it's documented in the Arabic text called the Cooking Book. There are even many claims and evidence of haris being a dish eaten during the time of the Prophet Muhammad in the 6th century. One thing also to know about Qatar, is probably one of the most common facts though, is that petrol is extremely cheap, guys. Since Qatar has the highest GDP per capita in the world, as well as being the biggest exporter of liquid gas in in the world, the country's oil and gas revenues are a huge contributing factor to its GDP. So of course, for the local people, gas prices are super cheap, and I mean, you can fill up a tank of gas for 50 Qatari riyal. And currently, 1 Qatari riyal is worth 27 cents in US dollars. Another thing to note about the culture in Qatar is that most women from other Gulf countries say that they prefer Qatari men. The Qatari men are supposed to be gentle, romantic, and more caring. Now, I just had to throw this fact in here because recently the 2018 FIFA World Cup wrapped up, but guess which country is hosting the next World Cup in 2022? Yeah, Qatar. It will be the first Middle Eastern country to host the FIFA tournament. Now, due to the intense heat of the summers there, the World Cup won't be held in June or July as usual, but it would actually be held in November to December instead. Now, there are major preparations happening in the country, including 9 new stadiums being constructed right now. And did you know that Qatar is also the safest country in the world? Like, there was an article in the Telegraph that quoted that Qatar is the least likeliest country in the world to be struck by a natural disaster. So like the most that happened in Qatar in recent years are aftershocks of earthquakes in neighboring countries, as well as they had some sandstorms. But pretty much you go to Qatar, it's like a paradise. You don't really have to worry about anything. Okay, now the last set of facts about Qatar that I want to share with you is about the tallest building. Did you know that the tallest building in the world was going to be in Qatar until the project got cancelled? It was supposed to be a 1,808 feet tower in Doha, and it was set to become one of the world's tallest buildings. But there was just one problem. It was so tall that officials worried that it would make it tough for pilots landing and taking off from the new airport. Construction was halted until Doha's new airport was finished, until the project was abruptly cancelled anyways. Qatar has been ruled by the Al Thani family since the early 1900s, when it was controlled by the British. On July 17, 1913, Sheikh Abdullah bin Qasim Al Thani became the ruler of Qatar. At the time, Qatar's primary industry was pearling and fishing. The country at the time was dealing with widespread poverty, malnutrition, and disease from the collapse of the pearl trade in the 1920s. In 1939, oil was discovered in the city of Dukhan, but development on the field was slow until 1949 because of World War II. While the oil discovery was great, it was nothing compared to the natural gas reserve found 30 years later. In 1951, Qatar produced 46,500 barrels of oil a day, amounting to $4.2 million in revenue. The discovery of offshore oil fields led to an increase in production to 230,000 barrels per day. Then, Qatar began a slow modernization process. The country's first school, hospital, and power plant, and even telephone exchange all opened in the 1950s. Oil revenue steadily increased through the 1960s as the Al Thani family grew stronger by placing relatives in high government positions. However, oil production is not expected to remain at its peak levels of 500,000 barrels a day because of the oil fields are projected to be mostly depleted by the year 2023. But Qatar has natural gas reserves to compensate for that. Qatar's reserves of gas are the third largest in the world. Qatar's reserves are estimated to be at 896 trillion cubic feet. In the year 1971, the world's largest natural gas field, the South Pars North Dome gas condensate field, was discovered off the coast of Qatar. But the crash of the oil prices in the 1980s stopped the growth of the economy. By the year 1995, the situation in Qatar had not improved until Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani took power in a coup, and then Qatar became a very powerful force. Hamad saw that keeping a low profile could be dangerous and set a whole new direction for the country. So how exactly did Hamad raise Qatar's profile in the world? What he ended up doing was pretty big. So first, he let the US set up its regional military headquarters, the Al Udeid Air Base, outside the capital city of Doha. The partnership with the US military has given Qatar a new level of security. Hamad then went on to integrate Qatar into the global economy. He built the world's largest facilities for condensing liquid natural gas and began exporting liquid natural gas for the first time. Following that, over the past 15 years, 14 liquid natural gas plants have been built in partnership with international oil companies. In the late 1990s, Qatar entered in production sharing agreements with several international oil companies. And in 1996, for those of you who keep up to date with anything to do with the news, well, you probably know about this. Hamad launched Al Jazeera, which is a 24-hour news station that combined aggressive reporting, high production value, as well as an Islamic worldview. Al Jazeera became huge, and the purpose of this organization was really about enhancing Qatar's visibility as well as its influence. But the channel has gone on to be one of the most important broadcasters in the whole Arab world when it comes to news. Qatar's GDP has skyrocketed over the past 15 years thanks to steady oil production and high natural gas production. In regards to planning for the future depletion of its oil, well, Qatar has taken measures to diversify its economy. In the year 1998, the government built Education City, which is a huge campus that supports 6 American and 2 European universities, as well as research centers. Qatar has a sovereign wealth fund of $170 billion. Then in the year 2005, Qatar established the Qatar Investment Authority to recycle oil and gas income into other income streams. In other words, it was set up to buy a lot of things around the world and thus reduces the country's exposure to the oil price. In London alone, it owns Harrods, the Shard, the Chelsea Barracks site, the US Embassy, and the Olympic Village site, among many others. It is also the largest shareholder in Sainsbury, which is just over a quarter of the business. And check this, guys, it also co-owns Miramax Films after purchasing it from Disney with a group of other investors. The Qatar Financial Center was built in 2005 to develop Qatar's financial services industry. The country believes it can become a financial services leader for the Gulf states thanks to its relative stability and large base of capital. In 2006, Qatar passed Indonesia to become the largest exporter of liquid natural gases in the world, with revenues from oil and natural gas amounting to 60% of Qatar's GDP. But more competition was coming, with liquid natural gas production booming in places like the United States as well as Australia. And then in December of 2010, Qatar was selected as host of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And because of that, Qatar promised to build 12 state-of-the-art stadiums that would employ cooling technology so players could escape the heat. Qatar has positioned itself as a sporting hub for the region, hosting or planning to host numerous global sporting events. And last June, it was alleged that Qatar spent $5 million on bribes to secure the 2022 World Cup bid. Switzerland is now opening an investigation into mismanagement and money laundering related to Qatar's bid. So there's still quite a bit of controversy going on there, but hey, Qatar has really set itself up powerfully to be a powerhouse nation in the world. Number 10 leads us to Qatar having the best airport in the world. And this is actually according to the Skytrax World Airport Awards 2021. If you've traveled through Hamad International Airport, you'll know why it's so highly rated. From the fantastic public art to the smooth journeys that you'll experience there, it has a whole lot going for it. It's also home to the longest runway in Western Asia at 15,912 feet and the 6th longest in the entire world. For fact number 9, their sea meets the desert. Khor Al Adad is one of the world's only places where the sea meets the desert. The dunes of the desert are always breathtaking, but Khor Al Adad, or the inland sea, is extra special. So this area, which was declared a nature reserve in 2007, is one of the few places in the world where the sea meets the desert. Qatar is attempting to have this area also become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and hopefully that preserves it for generations to come. Also, did you know that the longest cycling path is in Doha, the capital city of Qatar? Yeah, it has the longest continuous cycle path in the entire world. It's an Olympic cycling track, and it actually has a Guinness World Record because it's so long. It sits at 33 kilometers long. It was created by Ashghal, the Public Works Authority in Qatar, and the track was completed in the year 2020. It runs through 18 underpasses to ensure uninterrupted movement, and the track also holds a record for the longest piece of asphalt concrete laid continuously, with a length of 25.3 kilometers. Qatar is a country full of interesting features. Like, check this out. It's the second flattest country in the world. Some of you probably noticed, though, that Qatar is rather flat, but you probably didn't realize just how flat the country actually is. And its most elevated point sits at only 338 feet. Qatar is also a very rich country. Looking around at the amazing skyscrapers, the towers, and all the different projects like the Pearl Qatar, it should come as no surprise that Qatar, they got a lot of money. Let's just say that. It's a very rich country. Also, according to the International Monetary Fund's 2020 estimates, Qatar's gross domestic product, GDP per capita, is 138,910. But other reports do show that this number is a lot lower though. But in comparison to other countries, either way, Qatar's GDP per capita is like the highest in the world. Much of Qatar's wealth, of course, comes from petroleum and natural gas sources, which account for more than 60% of the GDP. Now, another fact that may come as a surprise to many people is that Qatar is actually the safest country. This is according to the Numbeo Crime Index. In 2022, Qatar has actually maintained its position as the safest country in the world. There are many reasons to love Qatar, of course, from the amazing museums, art galleries, as well as the beach and parks, and the architecture is beautiful. But a major reason that people move there is because the fact is that it's a very safe country. Doha, Qatar, is ranked the second safest city in the world according to Numbeo's Crime Index by City 2022 report. Here's another interesting fact for you guys. There are more men than women. According to the latest census figures from December 2020, men outnumber women in Qatar by about 3 to 1. With just 730,000 women in a population of 2.9 million people. In fact, Qatar has the highest male to female ratio in the world, with the worldwide average of male to female ratio standing at 101 males per 100 females. And this is according to the United Nations estimates. Traveling to Qatar, you will also see robotic camels. If you didn't already know, well, camel racing is very popular in Qatar, with races taking place at the Al Shahania camel racing track between October and February every single year. Originally, children would be used as jockeys for the camels, but for health and of course safety reasons, robots have been used since 2004. The robots are controlled by remote by the camel herders who often drive alongside the tracks. Fact number 2 leads us to Burj Doha. This is one of the most iconic structures that I think you'll ever see. Now, it was even named the best tall building in the world back in the year 2012. It was designed by the French architect Jean Nouvel, and this 46-story tower has some unique features that you might not have noticed. First off, the building has no central core and became the first skyscraper to use internal reinforced concrete diagonal columns, which blend in with the building's facade. Now, the facade itself, aside from being beautiful and a reference to the ancient Islamic design Mashribaya, it protects the building from the sun and varies in density around the building depending on where the sun actually hits it. Also, the building at night is very beautiful because it lights up. Ending this episode off at fact number 1. Hosting the FIFA World Cup. So of course now everybody knows this fact, but one of the most exciting occasions in football, of course, is the FIFA World Cup. This year, 2022, Qatar is the first Arab country to host this sporting event. And not only that, but it will likewise be the smallest country ever to host it, and the only one to host it during the winter season. It also is reported that this is going to be the first ever carbon neutral World Cup, although there are some reports saying that that's not actually quite accurate.